Welcome, everybody. It is a great pleasure to have you all here join us for this project that explores the history of participatory research. That brings past and present, but we are not here just to talk about the past. We are here to talk about also about the future of participatory research. Storytelling is not just about finding out what happened, but also about learning about the experience of others and learning from these lessons and using them to build a better world together. So this is why we are here. Bienvenidos y bienvenidos todos y todas. Es un gran honor tenerlos aquí con nosotros en este proyecto que que hace un puente entre el pasado y el presente de la investigación participativa. Pero hoy estamos aquí no solamente para hablar del pasado, sino para hablar del futuro. Las historias de vida no son solamente para contarnos lo que pasó en el ayer, sino para ayudarnos a construir juntos un futuro mejor y aprendiendo de las lecciones de los demás. Well, the structure of these workshops is very simple. We are delighted to have here three people who have pioneered participatory research in different parts of the world. And the structure, as I mentioned, is very simple. We are going to give 20 minutes to each of them to present their own stories. But today we have asked our guests, storytellers, to dedicate the first 5 minutes to tell the story or a memory or a short thought of some friends who are not with us, who are not any longer with us, but also to whom we owe so much for their contributions to participatory action. Hoy tenemos el placer de tener tres invitados de lujo que nos van a compartir sus historias. Ellos son pioneros de la investigación participativa en diferentes partes del mundo y hoy les hemos pedido a ellos que dediquen la primera parte de su presentación para hacer un homenaje a tres personas que ya no están con nosotros, pero que hicieron una contribución significativa en el desarrollo de la investigación en acción participativa. Eh, entonces, como hoy tenemos un día bastante apretado, voy a pasar a la agenda. As we have a busy session ahead, I'm going to talk about the program agenda for today. We have two short introductions, one by Dr. Rajesh Tandon, from he is founder and president of PRIA and UNESCO co-chair in the share of community-based research and social responsibility in higher education. He shared this share with Bud Hall. We have also Professor Jesus Flores from Universidad Autónoma de Colombia, who is going to present a little bit about the Plataforma IAP and his Center of Studies. And then we will give way to our three storytellers. Nuestra agenda de hoy es muy sencilla. Tenemos en primer lugar dos saludos. Uno de el doctor Rajesh Tandon, que es co-chair, copresidente de la silla de investigación basada en la comunidad y responsabilidad social en la educación superior. Él comparte esta responsabilidad con el profesor Bad Hall. Y tendremos también al profesor Jesús Alfonso Flores de la Universidad Autónoma de Occidente, quien nos va a compartir también, nos va a hacer una presentación. Estas dos organizaciones han apoyado inmensamente este proyecto. So we are going to welcome Dr. Rajesh Tandon, who is going to give us a greeting from India. So Rajesh, pass it over to you.
Good evening, Juan and colleagues. I'm Rajesh Tandon, calling you from New Delhi, India. I met Bud Hall in a meeting in Caracas in October 1978. That meeting explored the idea of creating an international network of participatory research. I began to animate that network in Asia, and after the international forum held in Ljubljana In April 1980, I decided to set up, along with a few colleagues, a research and training center dedicated to the values, principles, and perspectives of participatory research. That center became a formal legal entity in February 1982, and it continues, and I continue to play its leadership role along with others. So, PRIA, Participatory Research in Asia, is a global research and training center. And in the last 13 years, along with Bud Hall, in my position as UNESCO co chair, we are engaging with academics, not only in India but globally, to value the knowledge and experience of communities and indigenous people such that the challenges of our times could be addressed because the academic knowledge has failed to do so, may in fact have contributed to it. So, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. Uh, Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for all the support you have provided to this project. Le doy la palabra entonces al profesor Jesús Alfonso Flores de la Universidad Autónoma de Occidente. Jesús Alfonso.
Muchas gracias. Muy buenos días desde Colombia y buenas tardes y buenas noches inclusive en algunos otros lugares del planeta de quienes están vinculados a esta actividad tan importante. Como lo indicaba el profesor Juan Mario, les hablo desde la Universidad Autónoma de Occidente, que está ubicada en la ciudad de Cali, Colombia. Y en esta universidad pues tenemos como propósito fundamental contribuir a construir territorios sostenibles, o la sostenibilidad en todas sus dimensiones, social, ambiental, cultural, económica. Y por eso para nosotros ha sido muy importante vincularnos con la Universidad de Sheffield a través del profesor Simon, el profesor Juan Mario Díaz, en este propósito genérico de fortalecer las iniciativas de la investigación-acción participativa. Propósito que hemos venido consolidando al haber constituido esta red, una alianza donde participan organizaciones sociales, instituciones más comunitarias de base, instituciones también religiosas o con inspiración religiosa, varias universidades, entre las que estamos aquí en Colombia, pues la Universidad Claretiana, la Universidad Javeriana de Cali, la Universidad de los Andes, la Universidad Autónoma. Y en esta red nos ha parecido muy oportuno hacer gran eco de la memoria de este colombiano sociólogo que ha participado con varios de ustedes, los que hemos invitado a esta maravillosa historia en 50 objetos, en esta construcción de la apuesta porque la investigación esté al servicio realmente de los intereses sociales comunitarios, porque los sujetos sociales y comunitarios sean realmente esos, sujetos y no objetos de investigación, mediante su participación activa y que tengan esa proyección transformadora, que es en última lo que resume la investigación-acción participativa. En el natalicio de él, de Orlando Fassborda, pues hemos estado haciendo varias iniciativas, una de ellas un seminario de formación, y vinculado a esta, pues esta historia que hoy estamos tejiendo, de narrar en objetos o con objetos estas experiencias que tenemos de la investigación-acción. Entonces nos alegra mucho ser partícipes. Quiero agradecer a mis compañeras de trabajo inmediato en la universidad, Diana Carolina Campo, a la compañera Natalia, y también otro aliado importante que es el Centro de Estudios Étnicos, a la compañera Jenny Santa Cruz, que nos está apoyando con todo este campo de la transmisión y otras formas de este centro en el área también de investigativa. Entonces, sin más, darles la bienvenida, agradecerles su participación y reiterar nuestro compromiso para seguir consolidando esta red que hoy se sale de Colombia y se conecta con el mundo en diferentes continentes. Y muy agradecido con Juan Mario que realmente es el motor de todos estos propósitos. Gracias, Juan Mario.
Okay, so now we are going to move to what brought us today together. 3 stories of 3 pioneers of participatory research. I was interested in learning more about Falsborda and his work, and I found a letter. I am pleased that Francisco Biogrossi, of whom we are going to talk in a minute, we are pleased that Francisco Biogrossi and you have discussed the possibilities of cooperation as closely as possible in supporting action research work in Latin America. I'm going to skip a few parts. I'm enclosing copies of 2 of the working papers we have produced. Please share these, print them, distribute them, or comment on them. It is our principle to have no copyright. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce the author of this letter that was written in August 1977. Bud Hall, welcome to this project, A History of Participatory Research in 50 Objects.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Lovely to see that letter. And I actually, when Juan first showed that to me, I had forgotten about it, but it's a tribute to Orlando that he not only was he a brilliant practitioner of participatory action research, but he was a meticulous scholar and archivist. And all of you who in Colombia who have had a chance to work with his papers will know that he kept beautiful files. And so he had letters from people in all parts of Colombia and indeed all parts of the world. I think my first task is to, well, first of all, to say hello to everybody who has joined this very exciting first session on the 50 objects in the history of participatory research, and to thank Juan Mario and his team, some of whom are in England, some of whom are in Colombia, for the wonderful work that they are doing and the exciting conception of trying to understand this history through the interpretation of August. And I believe my job is to say a word about Maria Lisa Swans. Is that correct? Yes. So well,
Yeah.
let me say let me begin by saying habari gani, mabibi na mabuana, and I say those words in Kiswahili, and I say those in Kiswahili because Mama Swans, as Maria Lisa was known in Tanzania, was beloved for the work that she did in Tanzania. She arrived in Tanzania in 1963, just around the time of independence, and she and her husband were fierce supporters of the independence movement, and were and did and worked very hard to support the vision of this remarkable intellectual, the first president of Tanzania, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. Maria Lisa had training in anthropology, but anthropology in Tanzania had a bad reputation because anthropology had been seen as a colonial discipline where people from other places studied other people without making any help, without helping people to change anything, just writing stories about other people from usually from England or France or Spain or someplace. And so she was very much, although she had training in anthropology, she transformed that kind of practice that in Tanzania, and became her at the University of Dar es Salaam, where she was located. She was actually in the geography department, and she was one of five or six key people, along with Marjorie and Bellini, along with Yusuf Qassam, along with Kemal Mustafa, and others who really created this concept, which in Tanzania we labeled as participatory research. We started calling it that in 1973, and it became well known with a journal article in 1975. Maria Lisa died in May of this past year at 99 years old. And her last book, which is a wonderful book, she completed when she was 93 years old. And I had a wonderful visit to her in Lahti, that's the Finland, where she's from. I had a wonderful visit with her some 5 years ago, where Rajesh and I presented her with a Lifetime Achievement Award from our UNESCO chair. And she was still very vigorous. She traveled by herself, on the train to come into the city to meet with me and other university people. She maintained her friendship with Julius Nyerere until he passed away, and he visited her at her home in Finland at least once, perhaps another time. But she when she left Tanzania after her remarkable work with the women in the Makonde women in coastal Tanzania, and later the Jipi Moyo project, she became the first director of the Institute of Development Studies in Helsinki, and carried on and helped to transform the way that research in the global South was understood. So she would be, if she were, I'm so sorry that she passed away just before this all began, but we owe so much to her work, and I recommend her writings to everybody if you want to get a fantastic vision of the work that she did, particularly the work she did in Tanzania. So I thank everybody for this moment of reflection about the work of Mama Swans. And so I'll say once more in Swahili, Asante sana, Mama Swans.
But now can we listen to your story about the object you have chosen for today's workshop? We have a picture of that one here, and we would love to hear the history of that object.
Well, what is that object? That object is a shirt. It was a shirt that was sewn in Nigeria in 1964. And why did I choose this shirt? I have to thank my wife, Darlene Clover, for suggesting. Didn't know what kind of an object would you choose to talk about participatory research. But let me tell you why I chose this shirt. I had the opportunity as a student, as a university student, of studying for some time at the University of Nigeria in 1964, and the experience was the first step in opening my eyes to other ways of understanding knowledge and other ways of understanding the world. I had been, a student of political science in an American university, and I ended up studying at the University of Nigeria. And I had three Nigerian professors, Dr. Mdem, who was an anthropologist, Jeffrey Nwosu, who was a political scientist, and I can't remember the name of the historian. This was 1964, Nigeria had received its independence, political independence in 1961. These professors told us that we are not teaching political science that like you've been studying. We are not teaching anthropology like you have been studying. We are not teaching history like you have studying. We are teaching anthropology from an African-centered perspective. We have an Afrocentric view of political science, and we have the eyes of African eyes in history. And for me, I was 18 years old. I couldn't believe what they were saying. What do you mean there's a Afrocentric idea of history? What do you mean there's African view of anthropology? I mean, political science is it's what's in the book. You just read it, what's in the book. It's all the same everywhere. And they said no. They said that history is told very differently from different people and context and history. And political science is extremely different if you start to examine, African traditions in political work. And anthropology, the European approach to anthropology was, in fact, did damage to us as part of the colonial control of our countries, and that awakened me to this idea that knowledge is contextually very different, and raised the question of whose knowledge counts, and why are some people's knowledge so dominant. So when so I taught in a secondary school for a couple of years in Nigeria, and then I decided to continue to work on my PhD, and I studied at the UCLA in California that had a big African Studies department, and I had been attracted to this position because of my admiration for the ideas and the political ideas and the community ideas of the late Julius Nyerere. Julius Nyerere was the father of independence, but he was a remarkable intellectual who was searching for a path, an African path to development, and not to just copy kind of Western development, and neither to copy what was still strong in those days, a communist path. He was interested in what he called ujamaa, which is an approach to development and building community. Well, I showed up there at the Institute of Adult Education with training, perfectly good training, but very, very conventional social science research training, the training that I'd received as a doctoral student at UCLA. And I arrived in Tanzania at a time when they really wanted research to help build the Tanzania, a Tanzania built on participatory development and respect for the knowledge of the experiential knowledge of people living particularly in rural areas. And so over a period, I was there for 5 years. And so over a period of 5 years, many of us all of us who had been trained in conventional, Eurocentric, Western, academic disciplines, we found ourselves frustrated. We found ourselves out of not supporting, finding ourselves, not supporting the vision that Nyerere was calling for. Why do I say that? Because the research methods that I had been taught were put the researcher at the center of knowledge construction, and people's knowledge was simply something that you would analyze, but the knowledge construction was done by an academic. So imagine a young fellow from just coming from outside of Tanzania, and here I was creating knowledge, writing papers, trying, and with the idea that I am creating the knowledge. But what did I create? What could I create the knowledge with? The only thing that any researcher can create knowledge with is what's in their head, what kind of experiences, and slowly over that period of years, and in conversation with people like Maria Lisa Swans, people like Marjorie Mbellini, people like Yusufu Kassam, people like Kemal Mustafa. We had a visit from Paulo Freire, who at the time was in exile in Geneva, and he came to visit us. And over time, we came to realize that the approach to research, which we had been trained in, was a very colonial, was a very academic centered, and it did not respect the the vision that Nyerere had called for, and it did not draw on the on African approaches to knowledge construction. And so it was during that period that that this idea that we called participatory research first came up, and that particular shirt, which I still have. I have many. Those of you who know me well, I have many shirts, and they're all there. This is the first one. All of my African shirts are all made from that same pattern, but I've got many different colors. But it's I am my roots, my roots and my door, into seeing knowledge, in very different ways, and are really based on those early the great good fortune of my early years in Africa. So that's the story of the shirt.
I want to thank also Darlene for such a good suggestion. And also I want to let you know that we are organizing with Darlene, who is also supporting us, object-based storytelling session that perhaps we are going to be running in January or February. We'll send more information about that. We want to make the most of this project, so we are also running a hands-on session on participatory storytelling, object-based storytelling. Here is Darlene, so thank you very much. Please get familiar with her. And our second storyteller is Meghna Guhatakurta, who works in Bangladesh. So I was in contact with Meghna the first time when I was trying to contact Professor Anisur Rahman, to whom I admire very much. And I came across another letter by him, and where he basically said to Fals Borda, stop messing around with the names. What you are doing is called participatory action research. And if you want to keep the emphasis, the political emphasis, put the action in it. But what you are doing is participatory research. Stop messing around with these names and with these funny acronyms. So Anisur Rahman was instrumental in the inception of participatory research, and this is why Meghna is going to share us her story, not before telling us something about Professor Anisur Rahman. Megna, welcome to this project. What a pleasure
Thank
to
you
have
very
you here.
much. Thank you. So I will talk first of all about Anisur Rahman, and uh, it's a personal story. And I first met Anisur Rahman as a schoolgirl. He had come to live in our apartments above us in the Dhaka University campus, where my father was reader in English. It was 1970, an intense time for this part of the country, then known as East Pakistan. The movement for autonomy was in full swing, later to be the independence movement of a new nation called Bangladesh. We shared together the fateful night of 25th March 1971, when the Pakistan Army raided our apartment building and killed professors of the university, whoever they could find, my father among them. Professor Anisur Rahman and his family survived, but the incident left a scar on their family forever, as it did for the rest of the nation. Professor Anisur Rahman had always been passionate about his homeland. He had been part of a team singing patriotic songs to raise consciousness among the people. The people had been very much in the center of his thoughts. He perceived the movement for independence very much to be a people's struggle rather than of any leader or party. Much later, when I joined Research Initiatives Bangladesh as board member and was invited to be director under the leadership of the chairman, Dr. Shamsul Bari, I had a chance to come closer to Rahman's thoughts, reflections, and philosophy. These were moments that stayed with me. I witnessed him urging farmers, fishermen, women, and youth in their self inquiry, believing and making people believe, believing and making people believe that they were capable of taking their fate into their own hands rather than depending on God or government. These people readily started to believe they were researchers and even coined a name for themselves in the vernacular, Gono Gobishuk, or people researchers. Rahman's passion also extended to music, being an extraordinary vocalist of Tagore songs, something which reflected his thoughts on humanity and people centric development. But in rendering these songs, he shirked all institutional interpretations. He discovered and embraced in these songs the joy of creation and creativity, not only as an artist, but also as a teacher. The methods of which he laboriously wrote in his book Oshimer Spondo, The Spark of Infinity. It was these methods which young filmmaker, director Shabnam Ferdowsi tried to encapsulate in the hour-long film called Bhuban Bhara Shur, or Melodies of the Soul. If there would be a single symbol which would represent Anisur Rahman's thoughts processes and the methods he adopted in his own life, it would be the ocean. He related to us how his music teacher taught him to exercise his vocal cords. He was told to go each morning to the seashore and sing to the waves. See and hear how they rise and fall and learn from it. He seemed to have done that, just that, and continued to do so till the very end of his life. Thank you, Professor Anisur Rahman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really moving. And now, oh,
Yeah.
it was really moving. Thank you for sharing that story with us. And now we want to hear your story, the story of this wonderful object. that you have to
Yes.
tell us about today?
The object is very simple and mundane. It is a peanut. We all know what peanut is. Peanut is a global crop, is a food which I think everyone has peanuts in their country, right? So anyway, the peanut that I'm talking about was the center of a project which from Research Initiatives Bangladesh, which we did in the northern part of Bangladesh, northwestern part of Bangladesh. And it was regarding peanuts there are a cash crop, which grows in the sort of spring to summertime, and it is a cash crop because it brings in a lot of money to the farmers, more than the usual vegetables or potatoes or tomatoes that we know. But in Ponchagor, when RIB is in short Research Initiative Bangladesh, where I did my most of my action research from, started a project trying to do collective self-inquiry with a host of women. And these women were not farmers, they were wives of farmers. And in that area, uh, the women did not work in the field, they worked at home. And they were supposed to work. The social norm was men worked in the field and women worked at home. In many other parts of our country, we do have women working in the field, but not in this area. So when these women were entered, they were very poor women from very poor households, and um, and we had a 3-year long project with them. There was an animator helping them to do this collective self inquiry, but Anisur Rahman was also an advisor to us. And when he used to discuss these projects, sometimes he was very uncomfortable with the fact that these women are doing it out of their own accord to solve their own problems of poverty. And yet there was this animator who was being paid in full for 3 years by RIP, and he says this is not done. So I think what we should be doing, he suggested, is that gradually you withdraw the animator from the collective's inquiry process, and slowly but surely, of course at first they will need some encouragement. The animator was a local person but not a woman, and not a part of that look, and not definitely a group member. So, how to do this? So, we started actually that any project which exceeded 2 years, we would be trying to slowly withdraw the animator from the process of collective inquiry and give more and more space to the group members themselves, which were in this case women. So that is what we did. And at first, but how do you sustain the process? Because there is a process, there is a kind of infrastructure facility needed to bring the women together, to sit in one place and discuss the things. So the women decided to form a women's collective at first, which we call in the tradition way, Mushti Chal Shomiti. Mushti Chal means fistful of rice. Um, so the fistful of rice is basically each, because traditionally again the woman cooks for the home, and that is her traditional work that we perceive. She Each week from her rations she takes a fistful of rice and saves it up, so that by once a week she can donate it to the common fund of rice. So together, when all the women, say 8 women, puts in once a week the rice together, it forms quite a bit, and then it is sold in the market when they get a good price for it. So that is a traditional way of saving in our country. So it was nothing new, but through the money that was acquired, the women would be raising, say, cattle, some calves, and some goats, baby goats, and gradually, when they grew up, they would be sold in the market as well for a good price. So this was a way that the women was doing it for the last 2 years. But then they decided that they got enough money, more than enough, to buy goats and calves. And they thought that now we can maybe lease in some land and cultivate peanuts, because peanuts was the usual crop that is grown there. But then if they, who will work the field? Then the women says it's difficult to get labor at that time, so we will work the field ourselves. But then the real problem came was, you have to break certain social norms to do that. It is not allowed for women to work in the fields. And then these women will so then they started debating among themselves. They started talking to each other, and the majority, at one point in time, the majority of the women decided, we will work the field. We will be cultivating peanuts and getting the money out of that by selling them. So, but the majority was in favor of it. Even then, the day came when they started out into the fields to, they leased in a plot of land, and they went through the payment and everything. So the day came when they had to go out and dig in the fields. Then some women were still hesitant. Then there was this particular woman who was a school teacher, a primary school teacher, and she took the lead. She said, I'm a primary school teacher. If I can do the work, as a teacher, I can do this work, so can you. And she took hold of a shovel and started digging. There were some other women who refused to come because their husbands would object. So for them, what happened was, it was also the decision of that group that they will not rustigate anyone who cannot work. They will let them go. They will not force anyone to work. So that was a common decision, and they started to work the fields. At the same, a few weeks later, it caught the attention of the men. Some of the neighboring men came and says, hey, do you work for others as well? Would you work for me? I have a dearth of labor problems, so would you like to work for me? So some of the women agreed to do that. And other women from other villages came in and said, oh, we would like to work with you. Can you take us? They were not group members, but they came. And then they also asked them, can you teach us how to do this process of self-inquiry, which you did, action research? We would like to do that as well. So that's how the project grew. They cultivated their first crop, came up, and they got loads of money in the market for it. And their families were happy. Now, what happens? That was 10 years ago, 10 or more years ago. What's happening now? What's the update? So I got my colleague, we don't work there anymore, but I got my colleague to call them up. They pick our phone up. They're very friendly with us still. And they said, yes, we still work, but we work now many women are working in the field, but we don't get ourselves together in a collective group anymore. That became irregular once Rib left. But then what we did was, we took our actions into our households. And that really created a difference, because when they went back to their households and did the same kind of work that they used to do as a collective, it actually changed the gender relations within their households. Their husbands started to accept them more. They played a strong part in the household decision making, whether to send their children to school or not, where to send them. All these, they became and now more and more, it's quite usual for that group, for that area, to see women working in the fields. They now grow potatoes, vegetables, tomatoes as well, not only peanuts. So this story, the question that I want to address, now this was a big thing that many feminists have not been able to do. Many women's movement have not been able to achieve, to change the social norms, to break the barriers. How could the women do it? Um, well, was it? Why was it possible for the women? Well, one, I think they mainstream their work within the family instead of pursuing collective method at some time or the other. So in the family was a mainstream site of, you know, of production, as it was. Only the men produced and the women reproduced. But this time, the women also became producers and became accepted as one. Then and that helped to change the gender relations within the family. They were respected more. They were given a kind of a dignity which lacked before, and their work was respected because it also brought in money. They also chose a cash crop initially, which enabled them to earn a sizable profit. And that made a difference to their poverty. So they were very clever that they chose a cash crop, which actually made, you know, which were from where they could save up enough to send children to school, to go for health care where they weren't able to before. Thirdly, it increased the mobility and visibility of women in the public places. So they would have to go to the market, they would also have to go to shops, they would have to go to landowners who would sometimes employ them. So their mobility increased. And finally, they could influence future generations by enabling education for their children. So this is the how they broke their barriers. Now, what is the contribution of such thing? And you asked me to talk about contribution to participatory research. I will not only say only participatory research, but also feminist theory and research and practice. What does it do to them? So in turn, it was something new did happen, and the women themselves don't know how much and what they created. They just enjoyed their lives from then on. But um, what really happened from an academic point of view, if you look at it, is that the change that was incited is incited internally and not rather than through external influence. No one from RIP came and told them what to do. No one even came from the nearest women's organization and said, you can do this, you can do that. They did it out of their own volition and their own effort. Also, it meant women were deciding and interrogating their own behavior. Most of the time we interrogate other people's behavior, but here the women was actually deciding that no, we want to do this, and the other women didn't want to do this, so we led them not to do this. That is also a woman's decision. So this was interesting that they were deciding on the nature of their work, and also the importance of economic rationality as collective inquiry process. Most of the time we think that collective inquiry process is about raising consciousness. Believe me, everyone knows is conscious about what they want and what is right and wrong, but they are actually, they thought of economic rationality. And I say this not only in this field, but in other fields where women did lease in some land to cultivate various crops. Very interestingly, we think that farmers know better what crop to sow, when and where, but women also know. And the profit, because in other places women also said, they came up as some, we took some university students down to question these women, and they said that what else will you plant? Will you just go off? And so you planted cauliflowers and you got some things done, some got some money. What will you plant next? Said, no, we're going to plant some grapes and oranges and things like that. They said, and they laughed. They said, these women doesn't know anything, that these are they're very expensive crops. But that is exactly why women wanted to. They reached for the high-end market. They knew that they didn't have lots and lots of land. so that if they will be competing against male farmers if they produced rice or produced wheat, because that will need a lot of land. They have only that much money to have a little plot by themselves, and if they planted crops that produced expensive fruits and vegetables and reach the high-end market, then they will get more profit from it. So there is an economic rationality there, which none of us at RIB even thought about. But this was a difference that they made. They chose peanuts, which was a high-end crop at that time. And they also were able to decode work from a gendered perspective. Social norms said this work is good, that work is bad, this work, like the teacher who said, I teach, but I also cultivate fields. So that she came with a decision. They decoded what was work. What the social society told them that this was work and this was not work. Household, caring for children, caring for elders, feeding baby calves, that was work for women, but not others. Cultivating peanuts was not work meant for women, but they changed that. And by decoding what work was and what work meant for them, looking at households or families as a site for social change, we don't tend to do that. We think social change, you need a rally, you need to go to the government, you need to petition. Of course, we need to do that. But that's not the only way. Social change can also take place. The site can be your own household. I've done some studies on elections, and I've seen how that goes about. All the women candidates who stand for being elected says, first you fight your own family, then you fight the other voters. Then you go to the the other contest, the other candidates. So first you have to win over the family, then you win over the society and the nation. So this is a very crucial aspect which we learned from this project. And finally, the freedom of making the move from the collective to the individual. Usually, participatory research is about taking the individual to the collective. But we also see that the opposite is possible, and with great results. Thank you.
Fantastic. Megna, absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much. Look at all the reactions. Thank you very much for enlightening us today. I want to welcome my friend Victor Negrete, whose story is fascinating. He recently he have received many prizes and awards. I'm not going to list them all. Basically for a whole life dedicated to participatory action research. Since he, as a very young student, joined Orlando Falsborda's research team in the Caribbean, in Colombia, in the 70s. Welcome, Víctor. Víctor, bienvenido. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Es un placer tenerte aquí. Cuéntanos algo de Orlando Falsborda y luego cuéntanos tu historia.
Les habla Víctor Negrete Barrera. Soy colombiano. Nací en la costa norte, justamente en un departamento que se llama Córdoba, que fue donde llegó por primera vez el sociólogo Orlando Falsborda con dos propósitos bien definidos. Uno, aprender de las luchas campesinas que se estaban adelantando en este y otros departamentos del país. Y segundo, tratar de implementar lo que desde entonces empezaba ya a conocerse con el nombre de investigación-acción o investigación-acción participativa. Fueron 3 años muy intensos, desarrollado con los campesinos, que esto es fundamental decirlo, con ellos, con los campesinos. ¿Sí? Este trabajo costó mucho trabajo, mucho riesgo, muchas dificultades, pero de todas maneras se logró obtener unas lecciones sorprendentes. Lo primero que hicimos fue averiguar la historia, la memoria de las luchas campesinas anteriores, de donde se podían obtener muchas enseñanzas que se aplicaran en ese entonces. Estudiamos varias de ellas y los resultados fueron formidables. Tuvimos también una opción de cómo divulgarlos, porque la mayoría de los campesinos no sabían leer ni escribir. Y así fue como optamos por el desarrollo de las historias gráficas conocidas con ese nombre, que fueron muy importantes no solamente para el campesinado, sino también para sectores de la población, no solo de Colombia, sino también de varias partes de América Latina y del mundo. Allí, en ese trabajo intenso, duradero, la mayor parte del tiempo la pasábamos en el campo, en permanente contacto con los campesinos y sus familias y sus poblaciones en general. Aprendimos mucho, ellos también fueron captando más y más lo que era la investigación, acción participativa, y el resultado no pudo ser sino que se obtuvieron algunos triunfos muy importantes que significaron un progreso para una parte del movimiento campesino. Lo que me sorprendió a mí particularmente era que en esas estadías de días, semanas y años en los sectores rurales del departamento, con unas vías insoportables, con una vegetación asombrosa, allí los insectos, los mosquitos, todos esos pequeños bichos que molestaban en época de invierno o de verano, no dejaban descansar ni a los campesinos ni a nosotros. Pero observamos que ellos fumaban tabaco, y en esos tabacos que ellos mismos elaboraban y cultivaban, ¿sí?, ellos se defendían muy bien y prácticamente parecían desapercibidos de tantas mordeduras y de tantas picadas que hacían estos insectos. Así aprendimos nosotros a valorar ese tabaco tan amigable, tan sencillo, tan importante para nosotros. Durante todo el tiempo nos acompañó. Allí no hubo un día en que no lo necesitáramos. Y así pudimos realizar con más tranquilidad, con más reposo, todo nuestro trabajo, por dispendioso que fuera. También nosotros, acá en Montería, en la oficina, cuando elaborábamos los folletos ilustrados, también el tabaco era nuestra compañía. Eso nos daba tranquilidad, nos daba sosiego. Hacíamos chanzas, juegos con todo eso. Y también, aunque Orlando no fumaba, ¿sí?, pero sí estaba acompañándonos permanentemente. Yo creo que sin el tabaco hubiese sido mucho más difícil la llegada de esto de la investigación acción participativa entre nosotros y su aprehensión, no solo por los campesinos, sino también por todos nosotros y por todos los que nos acompañaron. Así pues, que gracias al tabaco, ese elemento sencillo, producido por los mismos campesinos, pudimos obtener un buen aliado para el desarrollo un poco más normal y un poco más tranquilo de esto que fue la investigación y que es la investigación acción participativa.
In the last 10 minutes of this workshop, we are going to leave the meeting open in case you want to say hello, in case you want to stay slightly longer. But we want to be strict with the time, so we want to finish because we know that people are busy and you have scheduled your agenda around this. Thank you very much for attending. So we are going to finish at in 10 minutes. But before that, we would like to listen to some reactions, any question, any comment. Some of you, some of the people who are joining us today, Joan, Patricia, John, you will be storytellers as well. I see some of my colleagues from Colombia, Alexis, Simon was before there. So please, the microphone is open if you want to make any comment, any question. But before that, we would like to listen to some reactions, any question, any comment. Some of you, some of the people who are joining us today, Joan, Patricia, John, you will be storytellers as well. I see some of my colleagues from Colombia, Alexis, Simon was before there.
Los participantes estas magníficas intervenciones ilustrativas por lo demás. Y me queda como la siguiente inquietud, no sé si será una pregunta, pero una labor constante o una constante en la reflexión es como con este proceso de investigación-acción o investigación participativa se pasa de ese rol de colonialista, ¿no? De llevar desde fuera todo el ejercicio y las posibles soluciones a problemas, a intentar que sea desde las propias comunidades. O sea, como que, digamos que ese ya es un principio muy acuñado al día de hoy, después de estos largos años de ejercicio que ustedes como pioneros y otros han hecho. Entonces, si hoy tenemos ya tan incorporado eso como un principio, ¿no? De que las transformaciones deben partir desde lo local, desde la comunidad. A pesar de eso, hoy seguimos en esta gran lucha, o sea, de querer o la necesidad de que desde la comunidad se confrontan con acciones coloniales, o llamémoslas también mesiánicas, ¿no? Todavía sigue existiendo mucha intención de que desde los estados se llevan soluciones o desde otros actores. Entonces, mi inquietud es más como una reflexión general, es cómo lograr que ese principio tan acuñado de que todo debe partir desde lo local, nosotros podamos, con base en este ejercicio, hacerlo más explícito, es decir, cómo llenar de mayor contenido. Yo sé que ustedes lo han hecho a lo largo de la historia, sino que este ejercicio se vuelva como una oportunidad para recoger, integrar toda esa gran argumentación, justificación que establece esto prácticamente ya como un principio, no solamente de investigación, sino también un principio ético, un principio político. Es como una invitación a que llenáramos, a que pudiéramos explicitar mayormente ese principio, porque al final es una apuesta anticolonial. Muchas gracias.
I just I agree. Thank you. Thank you very much, Don Jesus, for your comment. I think that the work and you know I was privileged to learn from Orlando when I met him first in 1977 at the Cartagena conference, and then worked with him. I was privileged to meet Anisur when he was working in Geneva, and then and of course I was able to work with Maria Lisa and other people in Tanzania. I think that the work that was begun even more than 50 years ago with Orlando's work laid foundations to what we are now seeing as a global movement of epistemic justice. Academics, we call it epistemic justice. Other people call it knowledge democracy. Other people talk about decolonization of knowledge. And what is interesting is that there is now in the academic world a lot of people writing and talking about in a very sophisticated theoretical way what is still needs more work, and I think this is what Don Jesus, what you're speaking to, is the praxis, is the link between this way of thinking about knowledge and the struggle for democracy. And that's not simply an intellectual or a theoretical debate. And so while I'm happy to see thousands of academic colleagues writing very sophisticated articles about decolonization and so forth, what I long for is I long for the connection to the movements that Megna talked about, and the early work that Anisser and she and her work, that Victor experienced working with Orlando, that many people have experienced, in Tanzania, where ordinary people, were the drivers of change. And if we, I think our movement, we need to be thinking about the connections between, what does it mean? We have to change our universities. We have to change our research in quite dramatic ways. And the universities have a nice discourse, but the way that they work is still very much the way universities worked 500 years ago.
Thank you, Bud. Thank you very much. Megna, I don't know if you want to add something to that, Megna.
I don't have much to add. I think Bud Hall Professor has really encapsulated the issue. But because of what I could get out from the Spanish to English translation, the word local has been thought of but nowadays I think that many of the work that was quoted in our presentations, except mine, which was just 10 years ago, but they were in a different period of time. When Anisul Rahman started to work, they were, it was the anti-colonial had some kind of meaning. But nowadays, with globalization taking over, and it is also juxtaposed in a very dominant narrative about global and thinking global, acting local. So what I think our work starts to do is to think of the local as as a not as a counter or as a juxtaposition to the global, but a new way of looking at global. So even if I go back to my own story, like when I talked about market, now there's market everywhere, but there were also markets or which belonged to the people. I mean, we call them local hearts, HAAT. It's local markets, which they would take place, one would know where they would take place in certain villages, in certain townships. And there would be local markets of goats, local markets of cattle. So they are now markets being overtaken also by markets of leathers, which used to belong to particular communities, which did tanning of leathers, and they would be now taken over by uh, the the national market, maybe. So these are the things that needs to be pointed out, the specificities of the local. And what is the specificities of the local looking at the global? How does the local define the global? Because definitely they have a global as well, but do we know that global from the one that the corporates use? So these are the things that our research tries to engage. And I agree that I don't think enough work has been done on that. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Megna. Thanks a lot. Víctor, do you want to add something short about this same issue? ¿Quieres agregar algo, Víctor, brevemente acerca del mismo punto? Tienes el micrófono cerrado.
Este año se celebra en Colombia el primer centenario del natalicio de Orlando Fal Borda. Nos ha sorprendido muchísimo la cantidad de eventos que se están realizando en el país, en universidades, en colegios, en pueblos, en instituciones, en organizaciones de todo tipo. Pero lo que sí llama la atención también es faltan trabajos en donde se desarrolle la investigación-acción participativa. La investigación-acción participativa para nosotros tiene tres procesos indiscutibles. El primero, que es el individual, cómo los procedimientos y los métodos que utilicemos sean prácticamente importantes, necesarios, útiles, ¿sí? En donde haya participación de todos. Segundo, la razón de ser, qué es lo que nos conmueve, qué es lo que nos llama la atención, qué es lo que queremos averiguar, por qué estamos haciendo todo esto. Esto también va creando una actitud importante. Y por último es, ¿para qué hacemos eso? Sí, para que difundamos todo eso. Y esto se hace en procesos más o menos largos, no son fáciles, no son cortos. Y ahí donde necesitamos entonces que todo aquel que vaya a trabajar con investigación, acción participativa, tenga esto claro y lo entienda perfectamente. Necesitamos crear esos grupos y esos grupos son difíciles de constituirlos en estas condiciones, pero se pueden hacer y lo que estamos haciendo también es convertir desde primaria y secundaria educación para los y en las universidades estamos llevando esta propuesta. Yo creo que poco a poco, incluso para lo que estamos hablando en Colombia también, el conflicto que tenemos en Colombia, estamos proponiendo que sea y que se vea a través de la investigación acción participativa. Esperamos respuestas sobre eso. A ustedes les va a llegar, si no les ha llegado, un documento que recoge precisamente esa propuesta. Muchísimas gracias.
A ti, Víctor, muchas gracias. Unfortunately, we don't have more time for questions today. So if you want to let us your comment on the chat box, we really appreciate it. I don't want to finish this without giving a massive thanks to two people who have made this possible. Before the landing page, I would like to introduce you to colleagues that have been instrumental to this project. This wouldn't be happen without the effort and dedication of two of my colleagues who have spent hours and hours creating videos, flyers, PowerPoints, and everything to get and creating the site and everything to give this to make this project come through. So please, I will ask a big applause for Diana Carolina Campo from Autonomous University and Natalia Solis from the university. Natalia is a brilliant student who has committed a lot of her time to support us. And I also want to thank Jesus, who has put a lot of effort, and to Jenny Santa, who has been behind the scenes. Jenny Santa has been dealing with the whole platform, spending time to make the rehearsal. We apologize for the issues we have at the beginning with the translation, but fortunately was sorted. And we are really lucky to have Walter Vanegas, who is a professional interpreter, to work for us today. Here is Walter. Unfortunately, I hope so, he's going to join us for the whole project. Just a final remark. This project, the first series of this project, runs from September, so from today, to June 2026. There are nine monthly workshops, and the next one is on the 23rd of October. You are going to receive the information, and we are going to have again. Is that right? We are going to have three wonderful storytellers who are going to share their stories with us. This is an independent project. We don't have any support from any university. We decided to jump into the void and to see what happened. So we need to pay Walter. If Walter is not paid today, he wouldn't be back. So we need Walter back. That is very important. So look at this. Walter is saying, what about me? So we are here working for Walter as well. We want to produce the videos. We want to edit it. We want to have some expenses of pre and post production. But we want also to create an online and mobile exhibition with all of these objects. So any money you donate for this project is going to be spent. Every single penny is going to be spent on this project. But we are also very ambitious. We want to create a book at the end of the series, not at the end of the first one, but we want to have at least 2 or 3 series and to make a collection, quote or book. So any money you donate is going to be spent on this project, because I think there is no much project. The history of participatory research is not a priority for any university. The priorities are others. And we cannot be looking at forwards without learning what had happened during the last few decades. So it's very important to make to recover, to retrieve the history of participatory research in order to generate better practices as part of the, as Jesus mentioned, how we can do it, learning from the past as well. A lot of people are discovering the wheel, so we are here saying the wheel has invented at least 5 decades ago, and how it has been used is what we need to learn, discuss, and to perhaps to come with the better ideas, but building on what has been built. So with this final remark, I want to thank you all for attending, for making time to join us today. Again, apologies for the issues at the beginning. A big thanks to my colleagues. Un gracias inmenso a Diana y a Natalia, a Jesús y a Jenny por toda su colaboración. Sin ellos esto no sería posible, and we are very excited to have you here, and we hope to have you and more and many more in the session in October. Thank you very much, and a big thanks to you all.
Entonces ya.
I got a suggestion from Samuel saying that we need to invite Robert Chambers. Yes, we invited Robert Chambers, but I want to share with you a couple of things. Francisco Biogrossi was in hospital last month. He was supposed to be here today, join us, and also to present in October, but he was in hospital. So we really hope he is getting much better and that we can have him soon. And Robert Chambers, he's not very well. He has retired, and the last interview he gave was a few months ago. So he's poorly. So we really hope we can at some point have his story. If he cannot join us online, perhaps we can record his story at his own house if that is possible. But we'll do our best to have his voice as part of this project. And if you know anybody who we should invite, please let us know. We don't have all the names. We know there are dozens of participatory researchers who pioneer this around the world. So please let us know if there is anybody who should be part of this project. We'll be happy to invite him or her. Thanks a lot.